And welcome back to APUSH for All. This is episode 2 of our special APUSH exam review series. Today we're tackling the period from 1800 to 1848, transformative era marked by the growth of American democracy, westward expansion, industrialization, and deepening divisions over slavery and social reform.
And just for our listeners, who aren't taking this exam, just so you know what we're talking about, all of our students have to take an exam, an end-of-the-year exam, on May the 9th. And so they are very busy preparing for that. And it includes multiple choice, and it includes 3 different types of writing. It's a 3-hour plus long test. And so we are trying to help them with a little bit of cram with some content here. So today, 1800 to 1848.
Ooh, I'm glad I'm not taking that exam. If you're prepping for this APUSH exam, this is a high leverage era. There's gonna be a lot of attention that comes out of this particular era, 1800 to 1848, packed with political shifts, economic change, and reform movements that show up often on test questions. So we're gonna focus on 4 major themes. 1, expanding democracy and political participation. 2, the rise of industrial capitalism. 3, growth of reform movements. And 4, intensifying sectionalism. Let's break it down.
So let's begin with Thomas Jefferson's election in 1800. Was I going to sing that or something?
It felt like you were about to break into song.
It could have been. You go with it. Start
Okay.
singing right now. Okay.
All right, Thomas Jefferson gets elected in 1800. He is the first ever Democratic Republican president. So our first party system in America, you have on one side the Federalist Party, on the other side you've got the Democratic Republicans. It's called the Revolution of 1800 for 2 reasons. 1, because it is the first time we have a peaceful transition of power between political opponents. John Adams was the previous president. He was a Federalist. He is willingly giving up, well, maybe not willingly, he doesn't want to, but he does. He gives power up to his political opponent in Thomas Jefferson, a Democratic Republican. Another reason it's called a revolution, and Thomas Jefferson gave it this name, is because he really believed he was bringing back the true vision of the American Revolution, that spirit of 1776, of individual liberty and, of limited government. So his vision is going to emphasize agrarianism. He thought that we would be a nation of small farmers. He thought we'd be a nation that had a very limited government after the experience with an overreaching king and parliament. And because of that, he really envisioned states, individual states, having the most power in our new system. But irony alert, he actually expanded federal power, beginning with the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, which doubled the nation and fueled Western migration.
So that migration fueled conflict, especially with Native Americans. Jefferson sent Lewis and Clark westward after the Louisiana Purchase from France in 1803, but their journey also symbolized the displacement to come. Meanwhile, Marbury v. Madison in 1803 established judicial review, strengthening the judiciary under Chief Justice John Marshall. This gave the Supreme Court the power to rule on the constitutionality of laws. They could finally have a little teeth in the judicial branch here for the first time. Also, after the War of 1812, which is sometimes referred to as the Second War of Independence, we are now free and clear of the British, and we enter a period of intense nationalism referred to as the era of good feelings, where distinctly American cultural traditions of literature and art start to come into their own. Think Last of the Mohicans by James Fenimore Cooper and the establishment of the Hudson River School. Now listen to this, you guys. I was looking at last year's test, and there was an SAQ about between 1800 and 1848 about women. The DBQ last year was evaluate the extent to which the institution of slavery shaped U.S. society between 1783 and 1840, so right there in the sweet spot. And then there was an LEQ about evaluating the relative importance of the causes of a national culture emerging from 1800 to 1848. So we cannot underscore enough how important this era is.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not uncommon for College Board to want you to recognize the era of good feelings and how we go from nationalism, where there was not much difference between political parties, there was relative sectional harmony between North and South, and now that will transition into sectionalism and civil war. And that change over time is going to be critical.
Yeah, the last 2 years of the DBQ were the antebellum period.
True that.
So, I don't know, maybe they'll change it this year, but
or maybe,
who knows?
What if they went for 3 in a row?
3 for 3.
So we just don't know.
I don't know.
So let's fast forward to the election of 1828 when Andrew Jackson rose to power claiming to represent the common man. So now we're going to be in our second party system, you guys. Because Jackson felt that he had been wronged by the Democratic Republicans in the 1824 election, in the famous corrupt bargain, which we all know about, he is going to drop the Republican off of that name. And in 1828, he just runs as a Democrat. So he's the first Democrat president. And so another political party will rise to just be an anti-Jackson party. And they will be known as the Whig Party, or as I like to say it, the Whigs.
I do that too.
The Whigs.
It's like wheat thins.
Right.
Wheat.
So under Jacksonian democracy, suffrage is going to expand.
That's the key.
Yep, all white males get the right to vote. All property requirements to vote are removed. And so this is great, but Jackson is also going to bring conflict. He is going to preside over the Indian Removal Act, which is going to lead to the Trail of Tears. He's also going to veto the Second Bank of the United States, which was just a rechartering of the first bank so that it could continue to function. This destruction of the bank led to the economic panic of 1837. And something interesting that really wasn't, I think, consistent with his idea of smaller government and states' rights, he flexes the power of the federal government during the nullification crisis, which was when South Carolina wanted to nullify the federal tariffs. We just can't get away from them. And they wanted to nullify it, and Andrew Jackson said, no, I don't think so. You're a state. This is a federal law. You can't get around this. The federal government is supreme to the states. That is in the Constitution of the United States. So 3 important things out of Jackson's presidency: Indian removal, Second Bank, killing, and the nullification crisis.
As Jackson would say in a toast at a Jefferson Day dinner in 1830, the Union, it must be preserved.
All right, so it's hard to remember everything, but if there's something to take away from this Jacksonian era, it's that democratic ideals like suffrage, students have to remember suffrage is just voting. Don't make it more complicated than it is. Expanding suffrage means expanding voting rights for many white males, but not everyone. We have to recognize women are still being left out. Native Americans are still isolated and excluded from the American story, and Black Americans are still in an inferior position.
There was also a lot of new things happening economically. The market revolution reshaped American life in both communication and transportation. We've talked a lot about the transportation revolution in our classes. Innovations like the cotton gin, the telegraph, railroads, connecting regions, increasing productivity, and expanding capitalism. We are truly going to be on our way to building a national economy at this point. So factory systems like those at Lowell, Massachusetts, offered jobs to young women, but in controlled environments that echoed industrial discipline.
And transportation innovations like the Erie Canal, which was completed in 1825, and the new railroads, these lowered costs and expanded trade. We see cities like Chicago and New York booming more than ever before. And in the South, cotton became king. So this is where we get the change from tobacco in the colonial period to now this new nation, antebellum period. Cotton becomes king, which is going to deepen the country's reliance on slavery.
This economic change wasn't neutral. It widened class divisions. It boosted immigration from places like Germany and Ireland, which will trigger urban growth, and movements like nativism, anti-immigration will begin to take over in some cities. And it sets the stage for new reform movements as Americans begin to question whether this whole system was going to actually work out or not.
Reform, religion, and resistance. One major catalyst was the Second Great Awakening, a religious revival movement that emphasized individual salvation and moral responsibility. All men are created equal in the eyes of God, says Charles Grandison Finney in 1836.
And that spiritual energy also translated into moral reforms. And you might be thinking, the Second Great Awakening, we didn't even talk about the First Great Awakening. Well, the First Great Awakening, just to give us some context, let's go back for a second. The First Great Awakening happened in the 1730s and 40s. And that was because you had multiple generations who had now been living in the American colonies, who were, going farther and farther away from traditions. And it was felt that their religious devotion had started to decline. So it started to use very emotional preaching styles, very famous preachers like John Winthrop. No, John Winthrop was much earlier. He was in the Massachusetts
I bet his
Bay
name
Colony.
was John or something.
No, Jonathan Edwards. He's the First Great Awakening, and he was very emotional in his preaching and really tried to get his parishioners to have a more, emotional response and individual connection with God. The Second Great Awakening, this is going to happen post-War of 1812. We're talking like 1820s, 1830s into the 1840s, and it still has that same similarity with the First Great Awakening about deepening your emotional and individual connection with God, but a difference is going to be that it's going to actually it's going to use religion now to fix problems within society. That is a huge change from the First Great Awakening. So we're going to see this in the likes of the temperance movement, which was a fight to end alcohol abuse that a lot of women and children experience because of the men in their lives. So temperance refers to, getting rid of alcohol. Also, reforming education. Reformers like Horace Mann pushed for public schools throughout the nation. Another thing to improve society, abolish the institution of slavery, and reformers like William Lloyd Garrison and Frederick Douglass called for immediate emancipation of enslaved people. And then finally, women, were so important in the Second Great Awakening, and they also thought, well, if we can have this sort of power and influence in religion, why can't we have it in politics? So the women's rights movement started gaining momentum, which led to the first women's rights convention in American history, and that was in 1848 at the Seneca Falls Convention in New York, which released a very famous document called the Declaration of Sentiments, which listed all the rights that they believed women should have, and they naturally had just because of being human beings. So it's hearkening very much back to the Declaration of Independence and those Enlightenment ideas.
Also notable, we have African Americans who are going to start resisting through rebellion and leadership. Most famously, Nat Turner's rebellion in 1831 will terrify Southern slaveholders and actually lead to stricter laws to prevent runaway slaves and internal rebellion. But others throughout the country begin to continue to look inward. Shakers, Mormons, transcendentalists like Thoreau and Emerson, they're going to challenge mainstream society, promoting community, spirituality, and self-reliance.
I bet you love the transcendentalists, don't you, Garrison?
Absolutely.
Oh my God, of course you do.
I do too.
Oh, they're so granola. They're so.
I love Thoreau.
No, of course you would.
And you know what, Emerson? I really do love reading Emerson.
Once again, just at this time, men who have power and privilege sitting around and writing and thinking everybody cares what they think.
And we still talk about them today, which I guess they were right.
You know what? I'm always going to say that Thoreau and Emerson, they're our people. They really are.
Intellectuals. Maybe not Miss Keltner's. I get that now. Maybe that's why she doesn't.
Okay.
Segment 4. Let's get into it.
Segment 4, expansion and sectional crisis. The U.S. was hungry for land, manifest destiny. The belief that expansion was a divine right drove settlers westward. Texas declares its independence from Mexico in 1836.
Remember the Alamo?
That's right. It became their own republic.
Yeah,
at that
huge
moment.
loss
So,
at the Alamo, but
Huge.
they do win their independence.
The Oregon Territory was jointly occupied with Britain, leading to the 54, 40, or fight slogan.
That's tough to say. 54, 40, or fight. No, I couldn't even do it.
Fight.
54, 40, or fight. 54, 40, or fight.
54, 40, or fight.
Garrison's just like, hurry up.
54, 40. Okay. And by the way, 54, 40, everybody out there, it's 54
It does. You don't need to know that for the exam. Keep going. You don't need to know that for the exam. Keep going.
You do need to know. Okay, fine. Don't get the 7th point for complexity. Fine. And then you had conflict with Mexico over borders. That was looming as well.
Yes, important, all of them. And because with every new territory came this burning question. What will happen with slavery? Is it going to expand westwardly?
Westward.
Westernly.
Oh, yeah, you're such an intellectual who loves the transcendentalists. You came to see Westward. And in episode 1 of review, you said Townshend Acts. It's the Townsend.
Oh, my God. Rookie.
In England, it's Townshend.
No, it's not. It's Townsend.
Townsend, yes, of course.
So we've got the Missouri Compromise is one of these early moments when the nation has to reconcile with this slavery question. With Missouri's introduction as a slave state, Maine, of course, is created as a free state, and a line is drawn at 3630, Missouri's southern border.
5440.
Yeah, here we go.
You guys do not need to know these parallels.
And these debates are going to only continue to flare up as more and more Western land is introduced into the new nation. And this, of course, becomes a major problem after the Mexican-American War, 1846 to 1848, which we'll get to next episode.
I'm flattered by my one line in this segment.
Well, you talked so much
By
earlier.
1848, the U.S. was larger, more democratic, and more industrial, but also more divided.
Very profound. Let's lock in some key themes. Democracy gets expanded. Many are still excluded. Market revolution transforms the economy. Reform movements push back against all this inequality and injustice. And we have a series of territorial expansions that will reignite tensions over slavery. We're going to continue to focus on causation, what caused political and economic shifts, continuity and change, how did reform evolve over time, and we're going to do a lot of comparison, how did sectional identities differ.
And again, remember how this era shows up all over the APUSH exam, from DBQs on reform to SAQs about Jacksonian democracy. Keep these big ideas and named examples in mind, and you will be prepared.
We're going to do a quick thanks to all of our sponsors again, and thanks to you for turning into APUSH for All. Like our episode, subscribe on Spotify, Apple iTunes, YouTube, leave us a review. If you got a topic you want us to cover, let us know at our Instagram account at APUSH for All.
Yep, and if you have any questions about anything we covered in this episode, any clarifying questions, please send us a message on Instagram. We'll be checking those as we get closer to the test. And until next time, keep learning from yesterday to make sense of today. I felt like I was shut out at the end of that podcast.
Well, I think it's because you talked so much earlier.